Hi guys, it is Aoife from Fred Weasley Died Laughing, and I'm here with another weekly wrap-up. So the first book that I read this week was Blood's Pride by Evie Manieri. This is kind of like a high fantasy book, and it is about these people called the Shadari people, and it's like a few decades ago these other people called the Norlanders came and basically took control of their entire city and has kind of put them into slavery. And this is set obviously a few decades afterwards, so a lot of people that were children at the time are now grown up in their 30s, 20s and 30s. This is kind of set around this kind of maybe planned rebellion of the Shadari people, and there is this kind of stranger called the Mongrel, who's apparently this really great warrior that they are trying to employ to fight for them against the Norlanders. But the only thing is that the Mongrel won't name her price until after she has defeated the Norlanders for the Shadari people. And there's all this mystery around her and what her actual real motives are. And we follow a few different characters in this. And that's all I'm going to say about this, because if I go into it anymore, it's just going to get really, really confusing. This wasn't the best fantasy book I've ever read. I felt like it took way too long for us to realise, like for me anyways, a reader, to realise that like what exactly the end goal was. I couldn't figure out what people wanted a lot of the time, and there was a lot of relationships. There's a couple of relationships in this book between a Shadari person and a Norlander, and obviously these guys are supposed to be enemies. They almost can't even touch each other because their touches can either burn or freeze each other, because I know they're like completely kind of almost like a different species almost. And there was a couple of like romantic relationships that were in the book, and I felt like we were just kind of told that these relationships were a thing, and we weren't really shown anything around them, and we weren't really given kind of any kind of path to say why someone who, why these enemies would fall in love, why someone like why one particular woman would fall in love with a man whose entire race has enslaved her own, and how like everything came about in terms of their relationship. And I would have liked to have seen more of that, just for the relationships to make sense. I just felt like we were told, oh, like these guys are in a relationship and they love each other, and that's that, and you're not really going to be told anything more about why this makes sense. And yeah, I just would have liked more of that. I don't know, I don't think I have like too much to say. It was just kind of one of these like alright kind of books. I wouldn't be in a great urge to pick up the next book if I saw it in the library. I probably would. This is a book that I'd never heard of before, and I picked it up on a whim. And I do like finding more out about fantasy books like that, but unfortunately this time it didn't quite work out as well for me. So I gave this like a 2.5/3 out of 5 stars. The next book I finished was an audiobook, and it was Robber Bride by Margaret Atwood. And this is kind of this weird story revolving around 4 women, and 3 of these women are married or were married or in a relationship, and this other woman called Xenia, who they knew from college, has literally gone like at different points in their lives has stolen each of these women's partners, husbands and partners, and she has this kind of weird like power over these men, and she comes in and she basically just like wrecks these women's lives. And it's where these 3 women have kind of come together, and they are trying to kind of for the very last time kind of confront this woman. And we're seeing all about their past and their relationships, all the women's kind of different relationships, like with their parents and with their husbands or partners, and how Xenia came in and stole all of them. And like this was interesting, but like I have this weird relationship with Margaret Atwood books where I do enjoy them, but like I never love them, and I feel like I'm like not clever enough for a Margaret Atwood book, if that makes sense. Like I don't know, I think a lot of people can like find these like real deep meaning and messages within Margaret Atwood books, and I just don't. I just kind of read it and either don't or do enjoy the story and the characters. I did like the characters in this one, like particularly like obviously not the like kind of the evil woman, but I did like the other women, and I liked their relationships, like how they kind of viewed Xenia after all of this compared to the men in their lives. Like sometimes they seem to blame Xenia a lot more than the men that had run off in the first place, and were so easily kind of seduced to stray. And there was one woman in particular called Tony, and she literally treated her husband like a child, and it was just so weird but amusing. So yeah, I gave this like a 3 out of 5 stars, just because I didn't like really love it, but I didn't hate it either. It was just one of those kind of, yeah, it was okay kind of books. Yeah, so I think like a lot of people have really loved this book, so I do recommend it if you are looking to pick up another Margaret Atwood book. Go for it. The next book I read was The Good People by Hannah Kent, and this is set in 1825 in Ireland, and it is about a woman called Nora, and she and her husband Martin have recently started to care for their daughter's child, Michal, because their daughter has died. And Michal is kind of he was like, when they saw him when he was a toddler, he was like a fine child, he was healthy, and then now that he's about 4 or 5, he seems to have like wasted away. He's he's eating loads, but he's not gaining any weight. He can't talk, he can't really focus on anyone, he can't walk. He's like, just, he seems like he's basically like a disabled child. And because this is like in the 1800s and it's very superstitious country Irish folk, Nora starts believing that Michal might actually be a changeling, and we see kind of events kind of start to happen after her husband Martin dies, and all these weird things start happening in their village, and people start thinking that it could be because Michal has arrived and that Michal is a changeling. So the fae folk have kind of put a curse on the village in a way, and that Michal is bringing bad luck because he is a changeling. And Nora ends up going to this woman called Nance, who is kind of this kind of wise woman. She's apparently like, she knows the way of the fae, and she knows all these kind of like the old herb recipes and medicines and stuff like that. She's able to heal people, and the two of them are kind of working together along with a maid that Nora has hired, who like really like loves Michal, and they're kind of working together to try and get the changeling out of him. And it kind of shows that they will do anything basically to bring their human boy back from the fae, and give the changeling back. I really enjoyed this. I just thought the writing in it was beautiful. The sense of place and the atmosphere like that was presented was just so real and so authentic. I thought Hannah Kent did a really good job in portraying these superstitious Irish people, like living in the country, living off the land, really depending on, you know, the cow giving milk every morning, the chicken giving their eggs, and the potato crop being good, to live a normal life. And when that kind of happens, you can see how the village can turn on anyone who is like not so normal, anyone who's a little bit different, and how they can turn things around and blame all those kind of things on such a person. I also liked, there was a while where I was like wondering if there was going to be any talk. So obviously this is in the 1800s. Ireland was still under England's rule at the time. All these people were obviously quite poor people, and they would have been under the control, like they would have been living on an English landowner's land. They would have been paying rent to him, and I was wondering if there's going to be any talk about that. And then a few different times there was talk about rent, and talk about, you know, not being able to pay the rent and stuff. And I was actually really like, you know, that kind of thing was kind of just put in really subtly, where, you know, myself as an Irish person knowing Irish history, I was waiting for something like that, just that indication that Hannah Kent kind of like, you know, she acknowledged how Irish people were living at the time. They did not own their own land, and they did have to pay their rent. And yeah, so I just enjoyed that was put in as well. I love stories around Irish people and fae because I feel like we had a very, like, I'd say close relationship with the fae, like in like generations past, and how we believed the fae were, you know, they weren't these cute glittery creatures, but they were dark and vengeful and tricksy. And I love seeing stories around that, and I just think this did really well. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. Really recommend it for everyone, and I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Look, I finished this week. It is actually Saturday morning when I am filming this, but I don't think I'll have any time this weekend, this Halloween weekend, to film anymore. So I could finish another book, but I'll talk about that next week if I do. But at the moment, the last book I've read this week is Can You Keep a Secret by Karen Perry, and I received this book in exchange for an honest review from Penguin Ireland a few months ago. But I'm actually really glad that I waited until October to read this, because this was kind of this, like, it was creepy but not too creepy, but I felt like it was a really good time to read this kind of book. This is about a girl called Lindsay, and she randomly kind of meets up, or like gets back in contact with these friends she had when she was 16, and it's been like over like almost 25 years since she has seen these people, since all these weird things went down when they were teenagers, which kind of caused them to kind of split up their friendship and never talk to each other again. And she comes back into contact with them, ends up in a relationship with one of them, and then they are selling this house that they all used to hang around with in when they were teenagers. The the guy that she ends up in a relationship with is selling this house, and he decides to have this kind of reunion party before they sell it and invites everyone back for kind of one last weekend. And things just start kind of going wrong from there, and we see all these like really strange things happening. Like we don't know really if there's someone out to get them, or you know what is going on. And I just really enjoyed this. I read another Karen Perry book at the start of the year called Girl Unknown, and that one was like, it was okay, but it wasn't like the best thriller I've ever read. So I kind of went into this expecting maybe the same, but this one ended up really surprising me in a pleasant way, and I just kind of ended up getting really gripped with the story. And I was just kind of ended up coming up in like all these different things that were going to happen to these people in this house, and I just didn't know what was going to happen. I was really like, there's like, we're getting stuff from the present, but we're also getting the story about what happened in the past. And I really liked seeing how everything slowly, like, was like layer by layer, slowly ended up being revealed about all these different people, and like the stories around them, the history they had together, and why things aren't as perfect as they seem. Yeah, I just really enjoyed this. I loved how like everything kind of wrapped up, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. So that is everything I've read this week. Please let me know if you guys have read anything, what you guys are reading, all the usual kind of stuff. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys again next time.